Climate change poses a serious threat to U.S. national security. That's the headline from the findings contained in a report produced by a group of retired senior military leaders. The CNA Corporation's Military Advisory Board determined that the risks of climate change are increasing more rapidly than expected and warned that the result will be a catalyst for conflict in vulnerable countries. Their report and a discussion of what lies ahead is the focus of this edition of Rewind.
A high point of my 9 terms in the United States Congress was my service on the Intelligence Committee. I recall a very controversial vote about a decade ago to include a study of climate change in our authorization bill. Well, 7 years ago this week, the Wilson Center hosted the launch of CNA's groundbreaking report, National Security and the Threat of Climate Change, written by a distinguished group of 11 retired generals and admirals. And today's update cannot come at a more important time.
When we began our work 7 years ago, we were in the midst of a divisive national debate about climate change. The CNA Military Advisory Board and the work of many partners here in this room and around the nation has helped reframe the debate from whether climate change is happening to the real risks we are experiencing.
Does this report say that the science is settled and that climate change is man-made, or are you focused on the consequences and not so much on the divisive debate about the causes?
So yes, the data is, frankly, it's pretty settled science, but that's not what this report is about. The report is about what can we as operating military do to make sure that our national security and our national power remain strong as we go deeper into the 21st century.
Why does this report focus so much on domestic issues when we hear mostly about how climate change is a catalyst for conflict, feeds terrorism, regional conflicts? Why so much on domestic issues?
I think part of the job we have is to convince people that these are real threats, that the consequences to our children and grandchildren are going to be grave, and to the extent that we can highlight the conditions that are changing around our own country, it seems to me we'll have a more credible argument.
Admiral Morisetti, we've heard a lot about infrastructure and the need to shore it up, but what about actual security threats? What are the hotspots for conflicts that are related to climate change around the world? Which ones should we be most concerned about, and which are the ones that have the most potential to affect us here at home?
Food, water, energy shortages, health problems, demographic challenges, and they're parts of the world where we've seen conflict before. We'll see it again. Often because the governments of those countries don't have the capacity and resilience to look after their citizens, and climate change is compounding that problem. But we've got to build that resilience in those countries so that they can meet the threats and the stresses, but also give them the agility to grow their economies and exploit the opportunities.
You have said in this report that it's a mistake to think about climate change as a regional phenomenon, except for we hear all the time that it's regional. It affects different parts of the world in different ways, and the conflicts are regional. Why is that a mistake?
When you put that in context, actually last year was the 10th warmest winter that we have had on record globally. The problem is none of us live in global averages. Despite the fact that it was very cold in Washington, D.C., it was very warm in Alaska, about 60 degrees a couple of days, and when I was living up there it was minus 45, so that's a big swing.
When you all worked on this report, were there big areas of disagreement? What was the biggest debate that you had to resolve internally when you were preparing this?
If there was a surprise to me, it was how much agreement there were on this basic concept that we see this change. It was identified in 2007. We see that it's accelerating and it's coming at us faster. At some point, you know, I tell people when I talk about this, what should we do? Just any audience. And I have a little acronym, but the last part is A, and the A is for advocacy. Let your leadership know you're interested and ask them how. Don't tell them how, but ask them how they intend to help stabilize the climate. You know, that's not a policy prescription, but it's an objective.
For more information on climate change and national security, visit wilsoncenter.org. Click the Programs tab to find additional resources from the Center's Environmental Change and Security Program.